Hey, this is Brian Yellow. Welcome to Origins, Stories on Creativity. This podcast, I'm talking to a friend from college, E.G. Cunningham. She just recently got her Ph.D. and was kind enough to sit down and talk to me about her experiences with writing. She's a poet. She's working on her second novel. We had some audio issues which were horribly unfortunate. I did manage to cut out a few of them, but she did say a lot of good things. There's some popping and crackling. It's listenable. You can get through it. I recommend it. I had to cut a lot of stuff out that it's just mainly my questions, but she's pretty intelligent, and everything she says is worth listening to. Otherwise, make sure you check out the website, brianyellow.com. Tons of new fiction on there. Follow me at Bry, B-R-Y, a yellow, A-I-E-L-L-O. And check out the notes. All her contact information will be in there. Otherwise, enjoy the show. Thanks for checking us out.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, this is exciting.
So you're my fourth guest.
Fantastic.
You earned your PhD, I see.
Yes, I just defended the scary title.
Is it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is in a weird way both weightless and all weight, right? The PhD part, apart from the student loan debt,
I'm with you there. Can
almost,
imagine at least you're 2/3 more than me at this point in time.
it's just the system's pretty broken there.
Oh my God, forget about it. It really is. I
Um,
have.
and it's a strange thing to do, you live for 5, 6 years in a very particular hallway, and there's no guarantee at the end of what that's going to look like. So it's been interesting. Yeah.
So you're at the end of it. What do you think your future looks like? Do you have an idea?
Oh my God, I don't know. I mean, there are concentric circles of answers to that question, right?
Yeah, right.
So
You're writing.
I'm writing, yes,
You,
sporadically right now. There's a lot of grading to be done. Um, so I just finished teaching and defended my dissertation, and
is that it for the University of Georgia?
that's it. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
As
Bulldog.
far as following your life goes, I think you've been there since the beginning of time, right?
It feels that way.
Like God said, "But there be light," and you were.
Yeah, along with the red clay and no, I've been here since 2011, and before that, I was at Iowa. I took a gap year where I worked as a clerk in an emergency room between going to the Iowa Writers Workshop and coming to Georgia.
In the beginning, you wanted to be a doctor,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
As far a medical doctor.
that's right.
When we first spoke in a German class, you were going through pre-med.
That's exactly right.
What happened? How come you went from being so on the right path to being over here with the rest of us trying to beat the English language in the submission?
Oh, it's its own right path, right?
Is it? I keep being told. I'm told it's not. Completely wrong.
Yeah, that's the question, right? So,
It's
and I'm going to answer your question, but this is
sure.
a podcast about creativity.
Hmm.
And I think when we stay with creativity, it's the right path. Short answer. Um, what happened to being a doctor? Well, I failed organic chemistry, got a tutor, retook organic chemistry, got a D, and was really struggling with using parts of my brain that I'm not the best at using, basically.
Hmm.
And then I took a poetry class. I walked in the first day, and the teacher was this adjunct young guy from Colombia. He was wearing a dashiki, like totally kind of trippy and strung out. And he arranged 3 items, I can't remember what they were, in a triangle shape on his desk and asked the class if it's a poem. And of course, everyone said, no, that's not a poem. Those are 3 objects arranged. And he proceeded to argue for 30 minutes as to why that was in fact a poem. I wish I could remember the argument. It was a sight to be beheld, but I went that very afternoon and changed my major to creative writing.
Wow. Does he know that?
Yeah, yeah. His name's Alex Dunsing. You can find some of his poetry online. He's a great writer.
Hook me up with the website. I'll add it to the notes of the show.
Awesome, thank you.
Do you remember what the items were?
No, I wish I could. I want to say one was a tangerine, and then maybe something, you know, like a pencil or an eraser or something, whatever he had on him.
Do you still agree with him?
Yes. Ellipses, right? Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's a really useful and beautiful metaphor. And I think that we've all had, and this is, you know, what creativity is we've all had those moments of perceiving something in our environment askew or differently or in a way we've just never conceived of before. And it can move us and it can startle us, that apperception. And whatever that is, sure, is a poem, is a lyric utterance, is an impression, you know, in the present moment that can be captured and rendered in a certain way, or
No,
not,
it's really wonderful.
or not rendered, you know, but just
Yeah.
so yeah.
I had an ex's mom develop a hatred for me because I would tell her the dirty dishes in the sink were an abstract expression of art. She she began to despise me. I don't know if because of that or other reasons, but anyway. Um, I distracted myself thinking of that exact story the entire time you were speaking. But the three items. Do you do that to your what were you teaching at the University of Georgia? Were you doing creative writing or was it just the lit stuff?
Yeah, it was a combination of both. I've taught two creative writing classes at UGA, an advanced poetry class, which is really small, about 6 or 7 students,
Mm-hmm.
and then an introductory creative writing class that covered fiction, creative nonfiction, and poetry. But mostly I've taught multicultural and first year English composition, so analytical writing, critical thinking skills, how to make an argument and close read rather than, you know, give plot summary or kind of character assessments. So a combination of the two.
Is it a dumb question to ask which you enjoyed the most?
No, that's a great question. You know, I think I often feel like I have more to offer with regard to teaching composition because it's like falling into a rabbit hole of analysis and students can only get better and better and better. The skills are transdisciplinary, you know, I mean, we need critical thinking skills in every
Mm-hmm.
aspect of life, especially now. And it's really rewarding to teach those skills. I think there's a limit with how much creative writing can be taught.
Yeah. I was
I
wondering if you were going to go in that direction because there's only so far you can push a student to explore beyond commas and periods and what needs to be capitalized and all that good stuff.
Yeah, and so much of learning craft or figuring out how one wants to write is about reading and letting stuff sit and foment and I don't know, adopting
Self
other,
exploration.
yeah, all sorts of things that a prompt can't cover and kind of easy or rather quick turnaround, quick feedback on workshop pieces sometimes don't have the, you know, chance to sit and congeal and develop. And there's certain, I don't know, I think everyone has to figure out also the ethics and the reasons behind why, the intentions behind why they're writing. And it's just as important as kind of learning craft.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that falls hand in hand with craft as well. When
Yeah.
you have the whole conversation of monetary reward or being popular or doing art for art's sake.
Yeah. I mean, being popular or rather visible,
Visible.
shall we say, is
Yeah.
it's a tricky thing these days because so much of it is tied to academic institutions. And so, you know, you've heard the MFA versus NYC kind of debate, I'm sure, being in New York.
What was it? I'm sorry, what was the debate again? You threw some letters at me and I got mesmerized for a second.
No, it's really gross. The MFA versus NYC debate, which is
Oh,
basically, right, we have these two branches of kind of codifying and instructing and publishing and recognizing, making writing visible.
okay.
Track, which is institutionalized in its own way and monetized in its own way, certainly.
Mm-hmm.
And then the New York scene, right, which consists of a select group of major publishing houses, and they're tiered in the.
Yeah, I totally understand what you're saying now. And in terms of NYC, when you said it, I was like, oh, okay, living life, you know, getting out there, exploring the world, figuring out where your place is, finding the words to describe it. I thought that was what you meant by NYC, but the dying publishing industry is basically what you meant. Because they're really not going to be too much of a competition going into the future, I don't think. They're struggling in the world of the internet and free content.
Well, I think that's true and not true at the same time. I still think there's a really vibrant, or rather sizable, publishing industry that's strong and will continue to be monetarily strong, and works that will continue to be visible through that line of publication. But I have some questions and some criticisms about the ways in which that material is curated. And
mm-hmm. What are a few of those questions?
how are people coming to be represented, by agents? How do agents get their eyes on material, and through which channels? How much of a kind of foundation of, quote, pedigree or visible accolades does one have to build up in order to buy this kind of cultural capital? Things like that.
Can I offer you an answer to all three of those?
Sure.
The name is Grace Helbig. Do you know who that is?
No.
I'm not going to disparage her because she's actually quite talented in a visual medium. She's collected millions of followers on YouTube and published 2 books, bestsellers, New York Times. Ever read one of her books?
No. Can you tell me her last name again, please?
Sure. It's Helbig, Helbig.
I'll check it out.
Well, it's not in terms of, if you're looking for literature, that's not where you're going to go. She has marketed her millions of followers, and the publishing industry has jumped on her and have sold her right back to her own following. And in terms of, your 3 answers to the question, or the 3 questions that you asked, it's how many people do you have with you when you go to the publishing industry? That's what the agents care about. How much work do they have to actually do? In my opinion, anyway. And of course, if you're able to argue with me, I'm more than happy to hear it. But
no, I think that's certainly true, right? That's part of the same hydra, I guess, right? So it's either visibility in terms of going through something the back way, doing something, cultivating visibility on one's own time and through social media channels, and then delivering that product, or it's kind of more traditional, old school form of going through other channels and kind of rising up the ranks and having names attached to you can then present as viable kind of authorities on the work. And I'm not sure what the answer to either of those, in my view, problematic ways of going about.
do you see a lot of people from the academic world going into the NYC world, as you put it?
That's a great question, and I think it depends on where you are. So I certainly saw a lot of that when I was at Iowa, for example.
Absolutely, because that's pedigree, right? You say Iowa and I almost said something crass, but you say Iowa and good things happen.
I suppose. I think it's very different for poets coming out of that program than it is for fiction writers.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So I was there for poetry, and first of all, there's not a kind of big New York publishing scene for poetry, right? That tends to be smaller presses, academic presses, indie presses. But the fiction writers would meet with agents at the end of their 2 years or whatever from some of
Mm-hmm.
the New York houses, and that certainly facilitated that relationship very easily.
And
I think
you were not able as a poet to slide into that type of gift, I guess.
no, there's just not the same readership or representation for poets.
Which is really interesting if you think about, I mean, not think about, but if you are, I'm looking at some of your writing. Obviously, it's available on your website, which is wonderful. You know, you're able to click on some of those links and see what you're developing. You're not writing just regular poetry, though. There's a narrative thread to it that's very familiar to what's happening in the literary world right now. And I see that you're also writing a novel too. So are you starting to capitalize more on your voice and stretching it out and making it into more prosy type of works?
I'm trying. Trying mostly involves just forcing myself to lengthen my very short attention span.
Meditation?
Meditation helps, and hard to maintain momentum, pacing, and a kind of
Oh,
a
oh,
plot
tell me
that,
about it.
will keep a reader sustained when you're working in a very lyric impressionist style of writing. So that's what is really taking me so long, is I don't have the kind of pragmatic prose chops of story structure and everything. Those are my weak points for sure.
Are you writing anything besides the novel?
That's been the main project at this point, and I'm always working on a few things at once. Like I said, attention span.
Uh-huh. Well, that's no problem there.
I mean, I'll write like a short poem or something for a couple of days, and then I have a couple of nonfiction, more meditative essays that I've been working on that will take me forever to finish, I'm sure, if I do. What I would want for my work and for myself in those regards, I don't tend to think in those terms. I guess I suppose, to put it another way, right? If I kept writing and nobody read a shred of what I wrote, would that be difficult? Yes. Is that what I do it for? No. So I'm really more concerned with, having a job that brings in a decent, livable income, and writing things that I'm proud of, or writing things that satisfied something I wanted to see myself do, um, more so than visibility. So, I get a lot of pleasure from teaching, and I've been on the market now for a while, and I'm waiting to hear back from a few places, and we'll know more in a few months. But ultimately, working a job, and but writing things that feel ambitious in terms of the craft and in terms of the work itself, rather than what happens to it or who sees it, or whatever. That is, you shouldn't just be writing to your own ego, right? I suppose. Have your own stuff, but the degree to which one's aware of that is important, I think. But no, just having something external in mind, even if it's a tree, right? And writing something out to this tree. So no, I don't mean to say that it's something just for myself. I think that if anyone writes, even if it's you're putting something out there, you're crying out or pointing out, or uh, indignantly kind of rebuking the world, and all of that's really, really important, because it also changes what's inside of us and how we relate to the world in other ways. I think, and I really believe that. It's not a panacea. It's not magical therapy by any means, but it forces us to self-reflect and self-critique. Um, I think the more married we are to the process of that, the more that happens. But it's a frustrating endeavor, that's for sure.
So anyway, as far as writing for individual gratification.
Yeah, right.
Uh,
I was thinking about that during the pause.
yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead.
No, please. I called you to.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those tricky things where I think it's a difficult thing to understand what we're doing whenever we feel the need to express it all, right? If we throw a temper tantrum, if we, I don't know, sob after watching some heartbreaking movie, if we sing along to a song we really like in the car, why are we expressing ourselves in that way? Is it just a way to kind of mitigate or pacify some kind of demands of the id or something like that? Yes, but I think it is often also seeking communion, seeking understanding, seeking belonging. And to the extent that we can imagine an audience, you know, if I'm writing a poem that's very abstract and maybe about a feeling or a phenomenon or an idea, I am more, you know, it's more creating a relationship to the language, to the thought that's externalized rather than to the self. If we're writing about a teenage girl in Exurbia, Texas, or something, who can't get access to an abortion clinic, we have to, you know, those things come out of a need to speak to something larger, and it's difficult to imagine who's going to sit with that text, but I think it's, for me anyway, more of a matter of cultivating some kind of tenderness or affinity toward just the idea of a someone out there who needs to hear something or would find communion in reading about a certain thing the way that I have. I mean, I just can't imagine having gone through this world for so long without some of the language and texts that I've interacted with and have been grateful enough to read.
Tell me a little bit about trauma theory.
So it's I think it's a pretty new designation, and my studies with it have been mostly self-directed. So forgive the kind of collage of fragments I'm about to throw out there, but I am interested though in, I guess, both actual trauma and trauma as a metaphor for disenfranchised experiences, whether or not those are actually traumatic. And I come to those interests, I think, from a couple of different focal points. You know, I've spent a lot of time in therapy. I found it to be a great resource, a very imperfect one, but one that encourages and promotes self-reflection and pausing and, you know, critical thinking skills, not dissimilar to the kind that, you know, my students helped me teach them in composition. And I also took a little over a year's worth of graduate and social work courses. I was hoping to get my master's in social work, but I paused that program of study to finish my doctorate. And I don't know, I'm interested in trauma as an absent presence, right? That which continually affects a person's or people's experience of the world and way of moving through the world and perceiving the world, but that isn't easily rendered, you know, that isn't maybe in the mainstream conversation, that is disenfranchised and therefore really complicated, both for the individual and society at large to know how to breach that barrier that traumatic experience or that which I I'm defining broadly as just a rift in a narrative, you know, a break, the idea of what came before.
So, do you think that you show up in your poetry in terms of the trauma theory?
How do you mean?
Well, when I write, I'm trying to understand my existence on this earth and the fact that it's finite, that it will eventually end, that there are a lot of things that come into impacting my own personal happiness. It might not be 100% me, but I'm impacted, and that's been traumatic during my life, and it definitely shows up in how I express myself. How does that show up? How does that manifest in your writing?
Yeah, so it's interesting that you bring up mortality because I think that's all this kind of unknown break that we're all facing down, regardless of whether we're thinking of it or not, or to what extent it's permeating our consciousness. And it's certainly something that I think about a lot. But in terms of what, from my personal experience, say, shows up in my work, or to what extent those experiences have shaped my relationship to language, certainly they show up, often sometimes disguised, consciously or not, sometimes frankly, if it's something that I think is an experience that people might need to have access to who have gone through similar experiences. And, you know, if they can decode that and it speaks to them, awesome. If not, also okay. But
Do you find yourself writing about things that you would rather not show the world and deleting immediately? Or do you find yourself reaching deep, finding honesty and putting it on paper?
yeah, I think I hope at least for like a provisional honesty, right? Where I'll write things and, you know, days, months, years later, I'll think, oh, I feel very differently about that situation now, of course, or, well, that was part of the truth, and it was a part of the truth that I needed to process at that time. Or
You ever
even if,
get embarrassed that you dug too deep and didn't realize it at the time?
hmm,
I guess my question more is like, sometimes like subconsciously you'll put something on paper, think it's the most beautiful thing on the face of the planet, and then 3 years later reread that story and go, my God, you just told the absolute truth about yourself in a story.
so I think, well, I think that maybe those are two different things that I wrestle with, right? So there's the truth telling aspect and the kind of reveal aspect. Uh, the degree to which one is comfortable in hindsight having been vulnerable, I guess. And that I'm usually able to be okay with because,
You're able to be vulnerable.
and able to be okay, you know, looking back and thinking like, oh, you know, did I overshare, you know, to use like the colloquialism, did I overshare in some capacity or not? That am more able to be okay with. The second part I think has to do with craft, right? And just looking back and seeing, oh, this could have been written so much better, or you know, this particular poem or this particular piece of writing is one that I feel, you know, is mediocre at best, and I feel that way all the time.
Of course.
Um,
Do you love your newest thing most of all?
no, no, I don't know. I think it goes back to that, you know, that relationship of creativity to desire, and I'm usually in love most of all with something I'd imagined that was far better when I conceived of it before ever attempting to wrestle it into any kind of a language. Um, So, you know, one makes peace with the fact that that's just you're never going to attain your ideal. There's always going to be a gap between the thing conceived and the thing produced. But in terms of poems that I've written that I know now to be 100% and honestly mediocre, that's just part of it. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's slightly embarrassing to have those kinds of pieces where you think, oh gosh, really? That's what I thought I was doing my best at, you know, then. But the flip side of that is if we're not doing that, then we're not really progressing in our relationship to craft, even if it's a delusional one, right?
Yeah.
I sometimes question, like, okay, um, it is possible to be a better reader, a better editor of others' work, um, or just a better reader of others' work, and to think more deeply about these issues and still be a mediocre writer. And that's, you know, it's a nagging irritant that crops up for me frequently. Um, and I
Are you
think
talking about self-doubt?
absolutely, I think it's part and parcel to the process of making something.
But
But that's, you know, that's a
I
long
definitely.
period.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. What was it?
I definitely struggle with self-doubt in terms of why bother? This is never going to work out. There are millions of me out there trying to do the exact same thing, and the majority of them suck. What makes me think that I'm going to float above it all, or for that matter, anybody? How can they get the self-confidence to actually sit there every day and punch out the words? I wonder where it comes from, because there's nothing saying. I mean, you obviously have been given professional license by a state body to produce poetry, but the rest of us haven't.
Well, yeah, and that's a really problematic. It's an interesting metaphor that you just used um, kind of association, because that has its own problems as well. I think that it's difficult on both sides, depending on what one wants out of the thing. You know, so for the for the world at large, or just kind of the general conception to be okay, if you have a degree from an MFA program, then there's a viability about your work that automatically endows it with some degree of legitimacy or whatever. Um, that's really problematic, because then it becomes about the identity or the experience surrounding the work, rather than actually engaging with what's on the page and evaluating it solely on those merits. And to be on the opposite side, untethered by those kind of institutional associations, is alienating, lonely, um, defeating, which the academy can also be. Uh, absolutely.
Instead
But
of just doing to do, you're doing with the constraints of right or wrong. Immediately judging yourself, immediately grading yourself, immediately wondering what your professor would think.
or just a certain population of the writing community, right? So if you're aspiring to be in this journal or that journal or whatever rising to the top looks like, then you're automatically sorting and sifting through what types of manipulations of language qualify to be entrants in those things.
Is it kind of cannibalistic in a way? And instead of really trying to reach the masses, you're kind of trying to reach your, equals. You're not really trying to write for me. You're trying to write for the guy who graduated last year, or it's going to be graduating next year.
I try to write for, like I said, something I don't have an answer to, right? Out of some sort of agnosticism, whether that's, I don't know, an emotional agnosticism or religious agnosticism, but just this kind of hallway between between answers. That's what I write out of. The
What do
way
you want? What do you want to achieve with writing? Is this getting too personal? I almost feel like we're on the verge of falling into.
through confessions.
Yeah.
No, no. Asking what we want to get out of writing, I think, is a question that we should all be asking ourselves, and a conversation, quite frankly, that would be well worth having. I think too often we get hung up on the marketing around things and conversations that are just not segueing too far from that. That we cease to have these kinds of questions about craft and about process and intention. So
Mm-hmm.
no, what do I hope to get out of writing? I hope, to keep writing something a little bit better than the thing I did before, or to take a risk, um, or
What's the risk?
to take a risk is to sit down at the desk every day and.
Yeah, that's not a risk. You do that though. You're good at that. That's like being a skydiver and being attached to the plane, jumping out, and your ripcord gets pulled.
Oh, but
You do that. I mean, what risk are you aiming for when you actually sit down and start tickling those keys?
I don't know. I don't feel like I ever get good at it. I always feel like I'm starting again, for the first time or something. Um, there's Because you pick up little things that you know that you can do, but once you've learned how to do that, it starts to feel like you're relying on a gimmick or something. Sometimes, um,
You fall back into the comfort zone. Is that what you're saying?
yeah, there's the potential for that. There's the danger of that, and I think the risk is continuing to push into experience, or a way of mapping language onto experience that gets to somewhere the light hasn't shined before.
The fascinating thing for me looking at your writing is how unique it is for me. I didn't study poetry at all. All I did was study creative writing. I didn't even learn any grammar, really. I just kind of do it by the seat of my pants and what sounds good, and I make tons of mistakes. As far as making a risk or taking a risk, that's me right there. I put a sentence down. I have no clue whether it's right or wrong, or whether or not it sounds good to me. So I put it out there in the world, and I know I'm going to get criticism. You know what I mean? But I look at somebody like you. You are very functional in terms of your grammar, correct? You have no doubts. You can write a perfectly eloquent sentence if you wanted to, but you're reaching beyond that with your poetry and you're doing something unique, correct?
Wow,
Is that the risk? Are you violating the rules?
that's really that's a very generous read, because I don't know if I even have grammar in my mind when I'm working on poems. It's more the kind of so it's very much about the patterns of sound.
Oh, that's right. You do your lyrical. What did you call it in your bio? I thought that was really interesting. A lyrical theorist? No, I'm looking now. You are interested in lyric theory, so that
Yeah,
comes into play with your poetry.
yeah. So I think if anything, it's like taking a bulldozer to grammar. Sometimes. Uh,
You, I take the bulldozer to grammar. I don't know what you would. And spelling and punctuation and everything else involved.
Hey, Albert Einstein was a horrible speller.
Oh, really? Well, I'm not gonna do anything for physics either. So, so you're taking a bulldozer to grammar. That's what poetry is, though, isn't it? It's reinventing the language. It's stretching it. It's
Yeah,
blowing it up and seeing what it looks like when you take the air out of it.
yeah. Derangement for sure. Yeah.
That's a good way to look at it. I love derangement.
Yeah, it's a strange beast. It's not for everyone. I wish that more people read poetry. Certainly, I wish that it was taught more widely and earlier in schools, and that we incorporated more contemporary poetry into teaching at an earlier age. because it scrambles your senses for a little bit, and that's a good thing, especially when, like we've been talking about, the way we consume media has become so kind of striated and passive.
It's really interesting to think about the fact that people who are studying poetry are coming from a more urban environment. If we can say, the more poor people in our society.
Is that true?
I don't know. They're writing poetry.
I think a lot of people are writing. I think a lot more people are writing poetry now than have been visible in the past, and that's a good thing. I think
as far as like visibility with poetry, though, the ones that are popular in terms of like the famous ones, they're rappers, right?
well, it's certainly a type of poetry, yeah. But I think there are a lot of issues that have been coming to a head for a long time, and they're starting finally to get visibility.
Like what?
Well, like the political climate in general, police brutality,
Yeah.
Native rights, all sorts of things. But and that's a great thing. I think that in terms of who
As a
goes,
woman writer, you need to mention women rights as well. It's definitely the forefront of a lot of discussions nowadays.
absolutely, and
I mean, the government trying to tell you what you can do and what you can't do with your body. I mean, it's absolutely disgusting. And it has to show up in literature, and not yours necessarily, but saying literature in general.
it's absolutely terrifying and disgusting. And I think I'm frustratingly, I think I'm most interested to find out what the experience of a quote ordinary woman looks like in a climate that is so there's so many mixed messages, right, for both men and women about what it means to be masculine, what it means to be feminine, and to what degree we're allowed to own those qualities, and whether or not they are sanctioned as legitimate by the world at large. And I think we don't talk about masculinity nearly enough either. We paint categories for people to exist in, and there's a kind of I don't know how to say it other than a kind of rigor mortis of expressivity in our culture.
I think what you're trying to strive for is something that's being referred to as the honor culture. The I'm a man, you're not going to respect me type situation. That's been my experience as far as that's concerned, is you just got to be able to step up and take a punch to the face. That's what being a man is today in our society. And if you do anything that's considered feminine, like my son, he puts a pink ribbon in his hair and I go, oh no, don't do that. And then I find myself doing it and I feel disgusted in myself. But that's still our society, as gross as it actually is. And you know whose story I want to hear about? I want to hear about that woman in Texas who has to go to New Mexico or, I don't know, Louisiana to get an abortion because she doesn't want to have that child. That narrative is interesting to me.
Yeah, I want to hear all of those stories too, and I would really like to hear them or read them in a way where I'm getting the full phenomenological experience of what that might look like, rather than the description of the situation more than anything, because we get a lot of that in our news media, and we get a lot of that through social media channels. But I want to know, what's the kind of present impression, what's the atmospheric tone and feeling around such a situation, because I think that's a way to kind of break down this barrier between what
we or you?
Pardon?
We or you? Do you think that your life has separated you from the voice that you're striving to capture? I mean, I know very little about you other than where you went to school, what you like, but it seems like you're fascinated by the experience of somebody who might not have the same kind of language abilities you do, or the same kind of mind that you do. who is able to define the world in which she lives in?
That's an interesting question. I think we all have that capability, right? And so it's
Do
just,
we? Because that woman who's in Texas who's trying to get an abortion, she didn't have the mind that you had going into that situation. And nor is she at the end of it probably going to be able to explain on paper the experience itself. But you, having the mind that you do, have to reach into yourself to find out what it would be like not to be able to express yourself in that way.
see,
Right? So, I mean,
I don't know. I think that we all are always defining our experiences, whether or not it's as a series of feelings or a series of intuitions, or whether they register in concrete language. I think that differ, or whether they're just kind of visual snapshots in the mind. I think that we all do that. We all have, access to really rich inner layers of consciousness, and um,
you do.
really,
I
pardon?
think people like yourself have that ability. And I think maybe that goes back to what we were talking about when my voice interrupted us about what your job is in society and about seeking an audience in terms of being able to reach into yourself and to pull out those voices, to look at the narrative, to stretch it out and tell the story of the people that can't tell their own stories.
So, well, there's a couple things there, right? I'm still interested in the question that you raised about, does my voice separate me from, can one's voice separate oneself from the experience that they want to represent or render? That's a
Mm-hmm.
interesting question, and I think, I mean, to
To answer it though, what do you want to represent? Let's start it from like the base. Like if you had the opportunity to represent the entire world, who are you representing? Who is Elizabeth? Who is E.G. Cunningham? I'm so sorry. You're one person to me. It comes out as one way. Who is E.G. Cunningham trying to represent with her abilities, her magic?
So yeah, I guess that's such a difficult question for me to answer, because it's never, the question for me is never who, it's rather what or how.
Do you get hung up on a word and want to explore it? How do you start? How do you start a poem? What is your process?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have a good friend who lives in Virginia. His name's Will Dunlap, and
Mm-hmm.
his mom is the poet Marianne Baruch, and she has this name for her process of starting poems that she calls the begging bowl method, where she just kind of sits and absorbs and waits for something to pop up.
Uh-huh.
Um, a lot of it is that, but
The begging bull method.
yeah,
So I mean, as far as a bull being obstinate, and you really can't do shit with a bull, right?
yeah, you're just sitting there, just waiting for something to land, for something to move you.
It's beautiful. Really, it works for prose too.
Yeah, absolutely. And for most poems, I think out of some sort of constellation of emotions that shouldn't go together but are going together, right? I mean, a pressurized collage of emotion or something.
So I'm right though. When I read your poetry, I'm getting a sense of emotion. I'm getting like emotion splattered all over that page, like an attempt to grab onto something ethereal, some kind of thing that's existing, this nut, this kernel, and you want to rip it apart and find out exactly why it hurts so bad, or
Yeah,
something
right. I
along those
mean, that's
lines.
why I think agnosticism is probably a good word for it. Yeah, and a dangerous way to write as a woman, because of course such writing is characterized as hyper feminine. But there you have it.
Yeah, I don't know. Do you worry about that being hyper feminine? I mean,
I uh, I worry about that type of writing, or that way of approaching language. The phenomenology of what it means to have an experience and what it means to feel. That being characterized as hyper feminine, I think it does a great disservice to both men and women and trans people to do that. And we have ways of thinking of the kind of like a simple declarative sentence is considered hyper-masculine and very much in the style and lineage of Hemingway, and that's aggressive and assertive, and just the way that we
But then you talk about me, though. I think my language and my storytelling is hyper masculine in terms of punchy sentences.
oh yeah,
Aren't you who you are? I mean, I'm a cis, whatever. I hate the word, but I mean, I identify as male. That's who I am, and I can't tell you who you identify as. You can only say that, but the
right,
world identifies you as feminine,
right, and so that's not to,
very feminine. You know what I mean? They don't look at you and say, "There's any doubt."
so there's a difference between, like, I'm not meaning to disparage the, like, uh the hardy simple declarative statement. I mean, it actually takes skill and polish and an ability to really learn, like, what the kernel of something, as you're calling it, is to be able to write those. And we need to have all sorts of varied tools in our toolbox. I'm not saying one style is better than another, or that one kind of craft isn't suited to a particular genre than another, but I do think that we tend, as readers, to, I don't know, kind of gender writing when we're reading it.
Say it again. When we're reading what?
To feel a sense of gender in a piece of work when we're reading it, right? So you talk about emotion. If something feels very emotional to us while we're reading it, or if the writing is particularly lyrical or poignant in a way that's evocative of emotion, that might,
We think of femininity.
right, exactly. Which which is an interesting, that's an interesting phenomenon to me in terms of how things are marketed, certainly, and who they're read by.
It's interesting because I'm not marketable. I mean, you can't market things to me. I'm one of the type of people that, you know, I'm more interested in history. I'm more interested in genre. So if I hear about something that's good, I'm going to go for it. And I guess it tends to be more masculine because I'm getting a lot of my books off Reddit. I don't read a lot of poetry.
So they have, like, suggestions on Reddit of what to read.
Well, I mean, are you familiar with the website?
Oh yeah, it's like the rogue state of the internet.
I guess it feels like just it feels like everything. There's conversations. I mean, you have a picture and it'll spawn like 2,000 comments, and within those comments there'll be discussions, and someplace in that discussion somebody will say, "Oh, you should read this book," and I'll immediately go and find that book and read it. And then that's how I find a lot of my literature now.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
What have you been reading that you've really liked or not liked, or?
Um, I'm trying to find really good fantasy, and there just doesn't seem to be a lot out there. I'm reading right now a book called "Smoke Gets in Your Eyes." It's a memoir from a crematory operator in San Francisco, and she talks about death, being up close and personal with it. I find it absolutely fascinating.
Oh, that
Um,
sounds really fascinating.
it's really interesting because, you know, I mean, you don't want to touch death. My mother-in-law died like 4 years ago. And it was horrible to be by her bedside and to watch it happen. And my thought was how, you know, that person, this lovely, you know, this wonderful person just died. And my immediate thought was, oh my God, it's, you know, I can't touch the thing that's laying there anymore.
Oh,
And I think as a society, we're so detached from this thing that's going to inevitably happen to every single one of us
very
that
much so. Yeah.
I don't know, maybe it puts a veil over it. 100 years ago, there was death everywhere. It was on the side of the streets. You know, they dug holes in Rome and just dumped corpses in there because they had nothing else to do with them. And we cleansed it and made it seem like a dirty thing. And this woman's kind of exploring that. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, I think it's really important to talk about, you know, the actualities of the everyday, and that's what it is. And
Yeah. We
um,
like to fantasize in our society. We like to put a story behind death
right, or
with the
deny,
whole, yeah,
or ignore.
or ignore. That's what we do. We ignore it. What is the number? 2.5 million people die every year or something along those lines. And it's invisible to us. We go through our day and it's not even affected. We don't even get affected by it at all. we might
Well,
see.
or exploited, and
What are you
as
talking about? The
something
news and war,
as
or
right, something that happens elsewhere.
the 4 people that died in Missouri just recently by execution?
Right.
I mean, it's fun. People enjoy aspects of death as a spectator sport. I find that enjoyable too. Not enjoyable, but interesting.
Well, there's
Interesting to think about.
yeah, I mean, the degree of voyeurism certainly as one of the more lethal, use the pun, repercussions of the internet. And I think that also creeps into the way that we write about certain experiences, and something to be really careful of, because there's such a glut of voyeurism and spectacle, just for kind of hyperbole's sake. But to talk again about, okay, what is that experience actually like on the ground, if you're that woman in the crematorium, if you're that girl in Texas.
Yeah, that girl in Texas keeps coming up, doesn't it? Is that, I mean, what is your novel about?
It is, so that's always a hard question. Maybe it's better to say what it's
It's
like.
interesting. I'm on my 5th novel right now, and I can't tell you what any of these novels are about. So yeah, it's like, believe me, you're gonna finish this thing 500, 600 pages from now, and you're gonna be wondering the exact same question: what the hell did I just write?
Maybe it's better to not know, right?
Maybe, I don't know. Trying to sell not knowing, it doesn't work very well.
Yeah, there's the rub. You have to have that elevator pitch.
Yeah, you do. So what's your pitch? Elevate me real quick.
Oh my God. So the novel is tentatively called Invisible Architecture, and it explores suburban, exurban Florida through the very, very close, a lot of free and direct speech point of view of a teenage girl narrator.
Okay.
And I'd call the style kind of a suburban gothic, very lyric, very impressionist, uh, slightly surreal at times. It explores family dynamics, I don't know, adolescent dynamics. The character meets a new boy at school who's Muslim, explores the town's reaction. So it works on a couple of different levels, or doesn't work on a couple of different levels right now, but that's the project.
What are you at, word count wise?
Oh God, I don't even know. Maybe 20,000 or something.
It's good, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's so easy to give up once you have conceived in your mind what something should look like. That the hard part's following through, and
That's the interesting thing, isn't it?
yeah.
My wife is gotten into baking. She loves I cannot eat sweet things. That's like my doctor yells at me every single time I go see him. Nope, stop eating the sweet things. My wife loves baking, and she's baking cookies, and she wants to decorate them, and that's wonderful. She's very good with the baking, but what she wants to do is decorate them too at the end of the day. Bring them to the daycare with the kids or whatever, and have these beautiful things. And she says that she has such a hard time bringing what's in her imagination to this cookie.
Huh.
And I tell her, and I'll tell you, it's like the thing of creating, you have this imagination that is, nobody can conquer it. It's invincible. And once you bring it out into the world, it becomes this newborn baby that's very, very weak. And it can die very easily unless you nurture it and make it grow up into this strong built thing that you're not interested anymore in loving, and you send it off to college or whatever. So it's not ever going to look what you think. I mean, when we were having these children, they were, little squiggly lines on a screen, but they came out, they were screaming and pooping, and man, it became a reality really quick, and it wasn't a lot of fun.
Yeah,
I feel like that's what writing a novel is like. It's like, oh my God, I got this great idea. I'm going to write about the opioid epidemic in West Virginia. And, 400 pages later, I'm beating my head against the wall.
right. Yeah.
I
And
can't wait to be done with it.
yeah, that's a pretty metaphor of baking. Does she watch the Great British Bake Off?
She loves it.
Yeah, it's very strangely calming and meditative, that show. But
What do
I
they call it? SMAR or something like that. It just has that
yeah.
soft, dreamy Britishness about it.
But I admire anyone who can bake. It takes an attention to detail and precision that I certainly don't have. Yeah, but that process of knowing how protective of something to be too, right? To
Hmm.
extend the parenting metaphor, or
Which I think is very apt if you're creating something like a novel.
yeah, or okay, how hard do I push
Push,
on this particular area, and what's it going to do? Is it
break
going
it.
to force growth? Is it going to,
You're not going to break it.
you know?
I don't think you're going to break it. I mean, I hope to God you can't break it because, I mean, are you lost in it right now? I mean, I'm just wondering because I'm lost in my piece that I'm currently writing. I'm
No,
at the end, I'm at the end of the stupid novel and I can't figure out how to exactly put the words on the paper.
right. I wouldn't say I'm lost so much as I've had to like it's a vacation island or something, and I had to, come back to the workaday world for a while. I've had to take a pause on it for quite a few months to teach and grade and stuff like that.
It's tough.
So yeah, I mean, the process of getting back into something, I think, is difficult.
But you're looking for a job in teaching.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
How do you feel about that?
It's a tough market. When the recession hit, a lot of people enrolled in grad programs to kind of have a
Mitigate
place.
loans.
Yeah, exactly. And as a
I just
result,
I just defaulted on mine. I said, screw it, this is ridiculous. I'm not ever going to be able to pay these back.
that's horrible. I'm really
It is. It
sorry.
sucks. It really does suck. And you know what happens is the interest just stacks on it.
Right. I mean, it's
So no,
repayment.
that stupid USF degree that I got, it's worth $150,000 right now.
Wow, I'm really sorry.
Right?
Yeah.
What are you gonna do? You have
Yeah,
to go to school. They tell you have to go to school. You have to get a degree, and then you get out, and it's like, okay, I'm on my own paying rent with a job that I can't afford to pay my rent on and eat. Something's got to go, and it's definitely gonna be that $500 a month payment.
exactly.
And you know what screwed me more than anything else is talking to a woman in Jamaica. Misunderstanding. She didn't send me the affirmative paperwork. Boom. Defaulted right there. No looking back.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like there's no latitude for second chances or
No.
clarifications, and we do have these seemingly really easy to swallow answers to things. Get a college degree, it'll be fine, but we're not having the conversations about follow through and what that looks like on the other side.
There's
Certainly.
nothing. I mean, you're saying you're looking for a job. You're competing with how many hundreds of people for those same jobs?
Yeah, there, and it's in the hundreds, absolutely, for each position.
I mean, I think you're pretty unique and special and whatnot, but I'm betting 25% of them are pretty unique and special too.
Well, and what we were talking about earlier with regard to visibility and what's deemed credible and what gets certain weights attached to it. There's a lot of that stuff is at play as well, and it's a buyer's market is really the
No, that's exactly what it is.
yeah. But like I said, I think it's really important not to tie the work to that other stuff. Use it. I mean, we can use the work to critique that stuff certainly, or to explore that stuff, but the work, somehow we have to keep fighting to keep the value and the worth of whatever we're trying to create separate from all that noise.
See, I think that's where I'm stuck, is that I want the work to be valuable. I want the work to be the answer. The work has to be the answer because I don't have any other answers. Nobody's going to hire me to be a teacher. I'm not going to do it by being a telemarketer or a waiter, and there are other industries that I can fit into. So the work has to be the answer. The marketing has to work. I have to be able to find the words and the equation necessary to get the eyeballs so that they can give me money. You know what I mean? There's no other way to look at it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know
When
the
your back's against the wall, you fight. And the fight is, how do you get an audience?
yeah, and I wish I had more knowledge in terms of that answer, because I've only really had experience in this one channel, and you know um that's a lot of blind luck and submitting something 300 times and, hoping to build a resume. It's kind of like trying to get a job when you don't have experience or something, right?
You
But
lie.
for previous experience, you start off submitting to this journal or that journal that might not be as recognizable, and then you slowly build up a foundation, and that's the way these things work, unfortunately. On the other side,
But when you
the
submit
kind
the
of
journals, aren't you submitting things for people just like yourself who are submitting things also? I mean, that's the thing that gets me with like a blog, or I wanted to ask about independent versus traditionally published. And I kind of probably understand that you would rather go in published traditionally rather than publish yourself. Correct?
well, I don't know about I have no knowledge about e-publishing or self-publishing, and I do know though how those avenues are viewed in terms of how they're weighted for getting a job. So it's not getting a teaching job is very much often tied to those kinds of things on your resume as well. Unfortunately or fortunately, um, and so I've only known that one channel to kind of go through. At this point,
And veering from that is death.
no, no, not at all. It's just I would have to know more. I would have to do some investigating. In terms of getting a job, not going to help, but
And what about sitting in the English department after you get the job and they start asking about what you've published and you said, well, it's on Amazon? How does that make you look? Would
again,
you?
I just think it depends on the particular departmental environment, what you're there for, whether it's a teaching heavy position or a research focused position, what they're basing, your tenure on, all sorts of stuff. It's but for getting in the door, probably not helpful.
Not helpful. And if you do get in the door, it's going to be embarrassing.
Well, I don't. Again, I think if you get in the door, then
You've
there's
done
nothing.
something right.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, no, you've gotten lucky.
You gotten lucky. Okay.
Um, that's a big part of this. I mean, in terms of the academic job market, we're talking about a lottery.
It's very interesting though, because we started this conversation, we were talking about, you know, .edu versus NYC, right? Or what was it exactly? You said NYC versus something. Was it .edu?
Yeah, MFA.
MFA versus NYC. But now they're holding hands. They're connected. If you do not go NYC, you're not going to get the job in the academic world necessarily, unless you're lucky.
Well, there's this, there's also the academic presses and some indie presses that have high visibility, right? So if you have a book out from a university with a very visible press, that counts for a lot as well. So
Is that the
yeah,
same thing though? I mean, in terms of like university presses, or if it's an indie press, it's still you're being published, right, by a force that recognizes your talent and saying, we're going to throw some money behind you, right? I mean, it's not like me where I said, you know what, screw this bullshit. I'm putting Compounded on Amazon or my next novel or my collection or whatever have you. And I'm just going to see what happens. It's not the same thing.
well, it is and it isn't, right? I think it just depends on the press. So there are some presses certainly that will compensate you mostly small amounts, sometimes significant amounts, more so for, the compensation is really in the newer publishing houses. That kind of commercial mass market publication is where the money is. Um, but there are also vanity presses out there, right? People who
Mm-hmm.
match up work and publish it in order to say they've done so and not compensate authors. And there are a lot of those. And there are also some reputable presses who do good work and who have really good ethics, but who don't have the financial wherewithal to pay their authors. And so it's just this kind of mutual understanding that, hey, we're doing this because we respect the work. We can't afford to pay you. But to what degree each press is kind of seen as legitimate depends on a variety of factors. Some of those, some others. I wish I had more kind of illuminative things to say on this matter, but I'm just not the best spokesperson.
I think you're saying exactly what you need to say. I mean, I understand how uncomfortable it makes you to discuss it. It's, you
No,
know, what it is.
there's a lot of experience
I
that
would appreciate
I don't.
honesty more than anything else in terms of what this is. And it sounds like you're in one camp and you're not acknowledging the other camp as being vital or viable at all.
No. That's not where I'm coming from. I've only had experience with very kind of anomalous and odd ways of getting my work out there. One is just submitting to journals blindly over and over again. Two is submitting to, contests, things like this. And then three, there's the route of going and querying literary agents and kind of looking them up and sending them cover letters and stuff like that. But
Do you have
all
an agent?
I don't know.
Have you gotten any? I don't know. God, you don't have an agent?
No.
I would think that they would snatch you up in a heartbeat. Have you
That's,
looked for an agent?
I have queried agents. I wrote a failure of a novel a couple years ago that was 700 pages with very little momentum and a broke down plot. And, at the time I was excited just to have written something uh,
Talk about
for
bearing
that.
the lead. 700-page novel is nice.
Yeah, but that's another kind of thing where I'm like, all right, well, what was that? What were the intentions behind making this thing? Because we associate really long novels with some sort of legitimacy, but ultimately the novel was a mess. So yeah, at that time when I was really starry-eyed, kind of off the trails of that, I did query agents and I had a couple reads, but it didn't lead to anything, quite frankly, nor should it have. The book was just not what it needed to be. But that's been
Who told you that, or are you telling yourself that?
both, yeah. So that was some of the feedback I got. Certainly, like, oh, this has potential in these ways, but quite frankly, there needs to be some serious uh, ripping
Baby killing?
out of the floorboards. And something that I've just observed as I've gone on and read it and gone back to it and said, it's time to shelve this thing. But it was a useful exercise in learning what not to do, certainly in a lot of regards, and then some things that maybe you can try to improve upon. But no, that's been my experience in terms of soliciting or querying agents and that world. It's been very limited.
So interesting. What do you think you could have done if let's say the economy didn't tank in 2008 and you weren't forced to pursue an MFA and job offers were abundant and you were able to publish poetry and make a living like that? Do you think you'd have the same, maybe this is a loaded bullshit question, but do you think you'd have the same type of hesitation towards allowing the world to have your 700-page novel?
I do, because I think that ultimately, we all have to sit in like the dark nights of our soul or whatever, and we all have to figure out what most meaningfully gives us in our lives value. And
What gives your life value?
I mean, I suppose,
Because you're doing it again, right? I mean, you're writing another 700-page novel.
oh no, gosh, no, I'm keeping this one under 3.
Well, okay, half of that, but still, at the same time, is it going to get shelved next to the other one, or
I don't know. I mean,
are you going to share it? I mean, I find it interesting, and I don't want to, obviously, I find you incredibly impressive. So it's not like I'm disparaging your efforts here. I wrote a novel. I've written 4 or 5 other ones that are in the process of being developed. I understand being in love with the idea of having finished something, and to put it on a shelf and say, oh, I'm not going to try with this anymore. That hurts me to think about it. And I can't imagine doing it. And you know what I'm saying? I don't understand how
Yeah.
to put this in another way.
And I mean, I
Because
don't.
this is a conversation about creativity, and you created something, you gave birth to it, and you're not proud of it.
Oh, I don't. Well, the fact that I think it should be shelved doesn't mean I'm not proud of it. You know, I just think there's this wonderful essay by this poet Donald Hall called "Poetry and Ambition."
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just about poetry. I mean, we could really just substitute writing for poetry there. But he's saying, you know, the most ambitious thing to do is to write a poem as good as Dante, not to get published in the New Yorker or what have you. And I think, you know, even that kind of thought, like, oh, I want to write a novel as good as XYZ, that comparative thing is problematic. But what I really respond to in that statement is the relationship to the process itself, which is not seeing an end and not seeing a use value, but is just figuring out how to craft language around experience.
Yeah, but you do it in a vacuum. I just can't imagine an artist like an actor standing in a dark room and acting without an audience, without a sounding board, without somebody saying, God damn, that resonated with me. And I'm so happy that you just said that the monologue the way that you did. How could you perform like that without sending your stuff out there to see if there's a reaction, going on auditions? And
So certainly you know, it's not that I'm just writing into a closet. I've continued to submit poems.
now you're much more published than I am. Absolutely. You've gotten your voice out there and whatnot. It's really impressive, but you've done it in
But
kind of a political way, would you say? Like, you've been very cautious with how you present yourself to the world.
oh, I don't know about that. I mean, I think it's been more really and truly, and sometimes these have been kind of erroneous assumptions or erroneous leads at the time. But okay, is this thing ready to go out into the world? Um,
Mm-hmm.
Not how does it reflect on me? And in the case of shelving the 700-page rambling, wild, disastrous prose it's not, it would not be instructive or beneficial to put that out in the world. It'd be more instructive and beneficial and would forge a better communion to make something that really works in its own right, rather than just send it out because you know what I mean. So that value in making something that does feel viable in terms of instigating communion or that approximates the the ambition of the work itself. And I know that that sounds really kind of high
It
high
sounds disciplined to me.
highbrow or
It sounds
snooty
disciplined.
thing, but
It sounds like you are a very, very, very disciplined person.
I'm very, very not, you know.
Seriously? I mean, you have made a judgment and you've stuck to it. Like, as far as the slush pile of indie published authors out there that are putting their stuff on Amazon, they've said, here's my work world. I don't care how it actually sounds or looks. You can have it. But you, on the other hand, have said, no, I spent years on this and I'm going to make the perfect form of expression. And I'm not going to share it until it is. And I've read your poetry and it's absolutely beautiful stuff. I mean, it's mind blowing, the words that you're putting out there. It's not like you're just saying, okay, here. That's very, very, uh, I hate the word very, but
so there have been, yeah, there have been definite instances of okay here for sure. But I
have
also,
there?
yeah, yeah. But I don't know, like, you know, that question about what gives life value and talking about value as related to writing. I don't know. I'd rather not have that stuff tied to like external validation or all. I would rather work as an ER clerk.
Where you validate yourself?
Well, I think we just have to think about what does that word mean? How do we define validation, and what does it feel like, and what
It's a good
kind of,
question.
you know?
How do we?
And, well, I think going back to that kind of dark night of the soul, like what is comforting, you know, or what is sustaining, what provides resiliency there. Often the resiliency comes from just, okay, I'm gonna do this thing. It's going to be sacred to me. Um,
Ah,
the sacredness of doing that thing and making this thing and being in relationship to this thing.
so there's a ritual to it. There's a religiosity to it.
Maybe,
There's a worship to it.
yeah. I think there might, you know, for me there has to be. Otherwise, I don't think I'd come back to it.
Because it's painful.
Oh
It's
yeah,
self-sacrificing.
it's super painful. I hope, you know, I think the goal is to be more self-sacrificing. I think we're all struggling with that. I don't know the answer about that, but it's definitely painful. Yeah. I mean, it's so much easier to do anything else than to like write out something honest and true. At least in the, it's true as it can be in the moment.
Yeah, exactly. Because you're always lying to yourself, aren't you? I mean, not you. I'm saying us as humans. We're always constantly telling ourselves fibs. But
Yeah. You just,
at the same time, you stopped saying a lie. You stopped telling yourself, this is good enough. I'm going to keep trying. I'm going to try something different. I'm going to try harder next time. Or is
so
that a lie? I don't know. Do you know?
I guess
I guess we're going into the subject of self-delusion as far as the creative process is concerned. How much self-delusion are you willing to put yourself through?
but the whole thing, that's such the lovely paradox of writing, right? Because the whole endeavor, like a lot of things, is self-deluded existentially. I mean, if we think about this, you know, in a very kind of far-reaching existential plane, like what is the concrete objective value of doing this thing versus I don't know, stitching up someone's guts, right, and on a table. It's hard to find the kind of pragmatic, utilitarian, like existential worth of artistic creation. And I think, you know, for whatever we do, like that's why we all have to try to seek that and make that in smaller, big ways with whomever we're in communion with. Like doing this hangout and having this conversation is one way of doing that.
Yeah, I agree, and it's really hard to find people to discuss this kind of stuff with. Like I said, you're number four, and I'm really enjoying these conversations that I'm able to have with people about our art and what we're hoping to do with our creations and our futures.
Yeah, really lovely thing that you've started. And I listened to um, the first two of your hangouts earlier this morning, and I can't wait to keep listening as you continue doing this.
Oh, thank you. I've got some scheduled. I'm gonna start putting them on SoundCloud. Obviously, they're so rough. I have no clue what I'm doing, and the technology is just, oh my God, it's like beating my head against a brick wall. Honestly, I don't know what I'm gonna do with ours. I mean, this has been a great experience talking to you because, I mean, how many years has it been? Last
Yeah,
time I actually heard your voice was when I was in Seattle,
I
and
know. It's been a
10
good
years.
at least.
So, I mean, you've definitely been an important part of my life in a way, even though that we've only had like maybe 2 hours worth of conversation, if that makes any sense to you.
Absolutely, and you have been as well. I've thought of you often over the years, and it's a tough thing that we've decided to do. You know, who would have thought on the quad at USF that we'd be having this conversation? But I would urge you, you know, to that in and of itself is so worthwhile.
What?
To have gotten to the place to be able to have this kind of conversation rather than, I don't know, um, not trying to pin down the world as it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, that's what we do, isn't it? We sit here and we think about our existences and how the definition of I don't know, the abrasiveness of life kind of creates it alongside of us.
Yeah. Yeah. Those
The
parallel.
everyday conflicts. I mean, damn, that little old lady just flicked me off. I just can't. I have to put some kind of definition on that. Little old grandma just gave me the finger. How the hell do you put description to that? You have to put some kind of definition behind it. What the hell did I do? I was going the speed limit and everything. That's me living in New York, though. I mean, God, it's so horrible up here in terms of like people just trying to run each other over.
I'm sure there's so much experience that you're constantly filtering through. It must be like oversaturation.
I mean, you grew up in Rome, right? A little bit.
I mean, a little bit. I was there from like ages 8 to 12, maybe a little longer. So about 4 years or so, and it was a strange time to be there because I don't know. You're forming a lot of impressions about social codes and social communications and expressivity and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, in my mind, I romanticize it. It's all very nostalgic and beautiful to me. Um, it's interesting to look back on that period of time now and see some of the social and economic and I don't know political systems at play, and in a place where I lived totally blissfully unaware of those things.
Uh-huh. Where'd you live?
We lived in a little town called Stresa, and right on the border of northern Italy for about 6 months. A very small town, and then we lived in Rome for 3.5, 4 years or so.
What area in Rome?
Let's see, we lived off of Aurelia Antica, and the address was Via Torre Rossa, which means Red Tower. Uh,
Uh-huh.
I think it's on the northeast side of the city, but
Okay.
yeah, across the street from a little park where you'd be running in the bushes and it'd be littered with needles, and then down the street.
Oh man, yeah, that's Rome, huh? I was only there for about 2 months, but I was right by the Colosseum
Oh
near
wow.
the big train station.
Oh yeah.
There was a set of stairs that nobody used, right? There was nobody walking down these stairs, and every other staircase was crowded with people. Like, what's wrong with these dumbasses? I'm going to use this empty stair, and I walked down and stepped like ankle deep in piss because that's where all the homeless people are using the bathroom. It's like, oh my God, all day long, my feet. Rome is absolutely the most profane place on the face of the planet. Time and so beautiful. I just can't. It breaks my heart.
Yeah, it's funny. I think that's the blissfully unaware part, right? I was only really saying the sacred. Um, have you seen? There's the series The Young Pope. I think does
Oh God, yeah,
it's amazing. I think
it
it
really
covers
is.
that really well.
I really think it's definitely very beautiful, and I can't wait for the second season to come out.
Yeah, me too.
But that's Italy. I mean, I don't know. Did you grow up Catholic? I knew you were religious at one point.
Well, my mom grew up Catholic and went to Catholic school. My dad Episcopalian, and I went to Catholic school, for those 6 months in Stresa, which was mostly an experience of kind of mute terror. I didn't know the language, and it was an all Italian school. Very few people spoke English there, so it was just total immersion. My dad was away on business a lot. My mom didn't speak the language. So more than the religiosity of that setting, I just remember, oh my gosh, how am I going to communicate? And then in Rome, I went to an international school that wasn't. I mean, it's called St. Francis and Clare, but religion wasn't a huge aspect of going there. Yeah.
You studied Italian though to get your PhD, or was it German?
No, we had to take two reading knowledge languages. So I did German, which was a revisitation, right?
Yeah.
We remember German at USF and French. Yeah.
Oh, French. Okay. I would live in Italy again. I thought it was wonderful. Such a chaotic experience.
Yeah.
For like somebody like me who doesn't mind bending the rules, it was wonderful.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. They're into bending the rules.
I got on a bus once in Naples and went down to Pompeii, got in there for free, walked around the entire thing, loved my day. You know, I'm not buying bus tickets because Italy, you don't need to buy one to get on the bus. And I got caught on my way home. This cop pulled me off. I left my passport deliberately back at the hostel so that if this happened, I wouldn't have it on me. He got so mad. I thought I was going to get beat right there on the street. He got so pissed off at me. his partner came up and he kind of just did the Italian, don't worry about it. He let me go.
There's a story for you.
Right? It's there. I started writing a little bit of it, but I got distracted. It's hard to write memoir stuff. It really is. Then you have to be honest. Honesty is the hardest part.
Yeah,
It's
and figuring out the appropriate distance for whatever you're trying to do is hard.
With the memoir, you have to really, really want to let people know your secrets. Because if you don't and you're hiding stuff, it's painfully obvious.
Or you can, you can have more distance and just want to kind of use yourself as a vehicle to reveal things about the landscape or the social relationships, but that's hard too because what's the role of the narrator? And
Yeah, well, that was good because I was thinking narrator when you were talking. That's where I put myself in it. And there's always a question is where's the narrator coming from? And it's like, well, it's the authorial voice in a sense. So I have no clue how long we've been talking. We started at 1. Wow. Yeah. So it's looking at almost 2 hours, give or take the horribleness of having to hear my own voice there for a minute.
Well, I'm glad we got it ironed out. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too. Do you think maybe one day we could do it again?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And don't be a stranger in the meantime. Thank you so much again for inviting me to do this.
No problem. You're one of the first people I thought of. I couldn't wait to actually get you on and discuss things with you, and you did not disappoint. You have an amazing opinion. I mean, you know, as unforgivable as it was, I wasn't able to get any opinion about my novel from you. This definitely makes up for it.
Well, like I said, I'm here. Let me know if I can help in any way. And if you want me to look over things in the future, I can absolutely be better about making more time.
Did you ever read it?
No, I haven't read it. I still have it. It's been a rough couple years with, I
understand.
I put a lot of my focus on finishing the dissertation and applying to jobs and finishing up the last couple semesters of teaching. But this summer,
my biggest fear was that you started it and said, "Oh no, I can't do this."
No, and I would tell you if that were the case. I would give you my honest feedback, but I haven't touched it. I haven't been able to. I'm sorry.
It's so difficult. I mean, that has got to be the hardest part about being a writer and the vacuum that you talked about. It was just my wife and her friend that read it. And the friend told me a lot of good things. My wife had no clue what to think because she obviously loves me and she's completely biased. So it's hard to do what we do.
Yeah, and there's so few spaces for discussion of craft nowadays that I think that and especially having a partner lay eyes on it, that's just going to be a totally different relationship to talking about the work.
I feel so bad for her too because she is basically my only outlet.
No, I hear you.
Everything.
My partner is very much an outlet for me too. He's
you broke up on me a little bit.
No, I said I can relate. My partner is my reader, and he's also a writer, and it's very strange what we do for sure.
So I wonder how that would work. I mean, she's not a writer; she's a math person. She's a finance genius, so to speak. So I wonder what it would be like to be with a writer. Does it help? or does it hurt? Because you're both looking for attention, right?
Well, I think he's similar in the regards that we were talking about, you know, in terms of what kind of intentions go into doing a piece of work, is the evasive answer. The short answer is, yeah, of course, we're both in this kind of thing. And the easy answer, like, what is that like? I guess it depends on the writer, you know. So
Is it torture?
no, it's fascinating. And I really respect his writing. I'm in awe of his writing, and many things that he's done have made me want to be a better writer, or have, you know, instructed through uh, diffusion or modeling. So it's daunting, yeah, it's humbling, but it's fascinating at the same time.
Do you think you'd be the same writer you are if you weren't with him?
No, absolutely not.
What a credit to the relationship, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a curious and tension-filled thing to do the same thing, and to do something, two people doing something that's so innately solitary.
Yeah.
Um,
And be able to share it too with each other. I mean, I can't read other people's stuff. I cannot critique anybody else's stuff. I'm an entirely selfish person. I would say, send me your novel, let me read it. But no, I'll never read it. That's why I don't feel that bad about you not reading mine, because I would not do the same. I would tell you, no, I can't. I will just disappoint you.
and see, you know, that's my problem too, and I need to structure my time better and be far more generous in those ways. I tend to ask for a lot more feedback from my partner Matthew than he does from me. You know, he's an incubator. He likes to incubate with the thing until it's pretty much done, you know.
Wow. Is he a pretty confident person too in his life, or?
I think most writers are filled with all sorts of self-doubt, you know.
Yeah.
And, going through the process of that hallway, you know, the 6-year PhD program where you really are playing the lottery at the end, which he's doing right now as well. It fosters those kinds of self-doubt and all that, and all those kinds of existential quandaries.
Because you're
But
surrounded by people that want to knock you out too. I mean, they want to knock you down. They want to take your place. Or is that too hard of an opinion?
I think it really depends on where you are, who your compatriots are, certainly, and like how you position yourself within that arena. I think most of that stuff is done on a level of, if it's done on a level of visibility that we're certainly not on, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of silence, actually, a lot of isolation. But he's very stoic, you know. He's from Indiana. He has a good Midwestern stoicism and steadiness.
I
And
guess that's the difference with me. I'm a whiny little bitch when it comes right down to it. I will cry and complain. My poor wife, oh my God, she's a saint. I swear to God, I feel so bad for her.
I love it.
Just working into this interview, she had to put up with me.
No, I mean, I love a good complaint myself. It's indulgent, you know. What can we do?
I think that's why we like each other so much, is that we're kind of cut from the same cloth in a way, emotionally anyway.
You know, we like to kvetch. What are you gonna do?
All right, so I'm not going to keep you any longer. You're an amazing person, and I really enjoy seeing your poetry when I see it. I'm so happy I'm following you on Twitter now so I can see some of your stuff. I hope you don't get an academic job and you have to throw yourself into your writing full time and become world famous, and pull me up with you and your partner and all these other people that probably, you know, in your fandom. You're a great person.
Well, you're overly generous. If there's any pulling to be done, you're coming along. We're so simple at this point, but likewise, and I can't wait to see what you do next. Thank you.
Yeah, me too. I don't know what's gonna happen with this, but I will send you I'll send you an email and definitely an invite in a month or two. I'll try to do it again.
Awesome.
Just continue the conversation, because it's great talking to you.
Yeah, you too, and I really look forward to it. Thank you so much.
No, thank you, and have a great day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And that was E.G. Cunningham. Like I said, she's amazing. Had a lot of great things to say. Again, I apologize for the audio issues that affected that conversation. Hopefully she comes on again. I definitely want to have a prolonged conversation on death with her. She has some pretty interesting ideas. Next time, we are going to be speaking with Dylan Moonfire. He is a world builder and a publisher. Until then, follow me at BRYAIELLO on Twitter. BrianELLO.com is my website. And this is Origins, Stories on Creativity. Soon. Bye-bye.